Hey everybody, welcome to the Pulpwood Queen channel. This is Kathy's co-host for the evening, Tracy Lee Carnes, and I'm reminding everyone who hasn't to please hit the subscribe button to not miss a minute of all the Pulpwood Queen's lively discussions and videos right here on the Pulpwood Queen channel. And now the Pulpwood Queen herself, Kathy L. Murphy. Yay!
Yay! Well, I'm excited. We're all over the place tonight with our authors in tow here. And I'm going to be introducing Francine Rodriguez in just a minute, who is our bonus book club author of the month. And I'm very excited about her story collection that we're going to be talking about. But first, I've just got to tell everybody today, I posted the working program for Girlfriend Weekend up on everything. Now, this is not the final program, it's the working program. We still have more authors that have not sent me their JPEGs for their, being featured. If you're listening out there, world, that every 2022 author, if you possibly can come, please do. You will all be introduced at the meet and greet on Friday night. You also will have other times of where we're going to be showcasing you and entering into the conversation. And then of course, Sunday night is our 2022 Books of the Year Award, which is our Pulpwood Queen version of the Academy Awards. But we don't ask you to go out and get a designer gown in the sense of like they do in the Oscars. We ask you to go to Goodwill, Salvation Army, or your closet and put together a smashingly wonderful outfit to wear to our grand finale Pulpwood Queen Awards. Our Saturday night event is going to be Dance by the Light of the Silvery Moon. And we're going to have an all-white costume for the ball. And my light, sound, and music man, who will be doing everything for the event, I'll be talking about Russ in just a minute. He said, "You mean all white people?" And I said, "Absolutely not." I go, "We are a diverse, multicultural book club. We're an international book club. We read books and authors from around the world of all cultures, religions. So please don't misunderstand the all white. We just wanted you to look like you were moon people. I don't know, moonflowers, whatever." And then Friday night is going to be our meet and greet. And we're going to have a really special surprise because we're going to be doing a book launch for Anju Gatani, who has been through the mill on getting her Winds of Fire series out. And we're going to do a contest. We're going to be looking for one of the characters in her book is called Rakesh. And I did a photo of Rakesh, and I'm looking to see if I have it handy right here. No, I don't. But we're going to do a lookalike contest, and we're hopefully going to be showcasing our model of who portrays Rakesh, and she's going to give away a swag bag from India. So everybody's going to want to be there on the Friday night event, and we're going Bollywood. So everybody wear your Indian outfits, and it doesn't have to be fancy. It could be a sari, it could be one of the tunics, it could be whatever you want to wear, and they're everywhere. In fact, I was just wearing this little tunic, and I got it at Ross for less. So, you can find Indian clothes anywhere. So we are very excited. And I just want to share one other good news. And she told me, please don't make a big deal about it. But I am. I'm going to make a big deal about this. One of my Pulpwood Queens is from Charleston, South Carolina, contacted me right before Labor Day. And she said, I told you that if you move Girlfriend Weekend out to the East Coast, I would help pay for something. I said, "Oh my gosh." And she goes, "What can I pay for?" And I said, "What would you like to pay for?" And she goes, "What do you need?" And I said, "Well, I have a really good light, sound, and music man here that I love to bring out, but he would have to bring all of his equipment and it's going to be expensive." And she said, "How much do you think it's going to be?" And I just guessed. And she said, "That's fine. I'll pay for it." So when his bid came in after the holiday, he sent it to me and it was a little higher than I even thought because he's bringing 2 crew members. I mean, it's going to be full lights like we had in 2020 when we had our live event. And of course, he's got to travel, 2 to 3 days to get there and 2 to 3 days to get home. And when I told her the price, she goes, "That's fine. Actually, I think that's very reasonable." I want to introduce you all to Kathleen Barnes. She's one of my authors. She's from Charleston. And if you get a chance, either at the event or on her Facebook page, tell her thank you. She's going to be so embarrassed, but she said, "I have wanted to do something for you for some time," because we met in Charleston when I was out there for a summit, a publisher summit with Sherry Staunch. And I sat down with her and we share almost the same birthday. And she goes, "There's a woman I want to hang out with." She goes, "The minute you walked into the room, the whole atmosphere changed." And I go, "Well, yeah, let's hang out some more. I really like the way you talk." But, it is very generous of her. And I'm not going to let it slide because it costs a lot of money to put on the Pulpwood Queen girlfriend weekend. And, volunteering, with anything is always such a wonderful gift. So thank you, Kat Barn. I hope you hear this. Now, tonight, we're here with one of our authors. I've been waiting and waiting for her to come up onto our weekly blogs, and she's our Tuesday night feature. Her name is Francine Rodriguez. She's got a wonderful collection of stories. And here, I don't even have it in front of me. Do you have the book in front of you, Francine?
Actually, I don't. I have the practice in the closet. Oh, she has it in front of her better than I do.
Thank goodness for my Pulpwood Queen authors. They're always on. Thank you, because it's buried over here because I've got all these 2023 books here. But she has a wonderful story. But first, I'm going to put you on speaker view, Francine. Sure. And then I want you to talk to everybody. Just tell them a little bit about yourself, where you come from, your backstory, were you a reader, what got you started writing. This is your time to let everybody know who you are as a person, because I found that the more people get to know an author, the more they want to read their book. So I'm going to put you on speaker view, and I'm going to let you talk to all of us. So go ahead, Francine.
Okay, then I will start. Let's see. Well, I think my background was, or is, I should say, a lot different than a lot of the authors' backgrounds that I read about. I didn't start writing until about 5 years ago, and I published 2 other books prior to this. I grew up in really inner city, mostly Skid Row area. So I'm really familiar with that aspect of life, that area, the people that live there. I think they give you some sort of roots in the culture, for lack of a better word. And it was a different time in Los Angeles. It was obviously, since I'm going to be 71 next month, obviously it was a long time ago. It was a less violent culture, very, very poverty stricken, but yet the area was not what it's become today, with the constant shooting, stabbing, so forth and so on that LA is known for. So again, I did grow up in that area. And the people that I was exposed to at a very early age, as I said, kind of carried with me forward. So when I started looking around and I saw that, well, if I didn't finish school, I was going to end up cleaning hotel rooms the rest of my life, because that's what I was doing at 14. I worked full time by that age. So I, dropped out of high school because I worked nights and I wasn't getting enough sleep. And I went and took my GED, and then I went on to college. And then after that, I got a master's and then finished law school. So I did manage to get an education. And I stayed working somewhat in that community. The first job I ever had was carrying mail. I got me through school. And then after that, I went to work for the feds as a civil rights investigator. And I did some undercover and some just straight up investigative work, mostly in the South. And it was very interesting to me. It influenced me a lot as far as learning about how other people lived, because it was very different when I traveled. Wherever I went, there was a particular culture, right? A difference than California. And I was very much struck by it. Some places seemed particularly in the South at that time, suspended in time, like nothing had happened for years and years. And it was almost as if there were Willoughby type communities, like Rod Serling talks about, right? Yeah, so I saw these, but I also saw a lot of things that were very sad. I saw a lot of really gut level poverty, and being poor in some places obviously is worse. Being poor in the slums of Cabrini Greens in Chicago when it was in existence is a lot worse than being poor here in Watts, even though I've seen both sides. So I really appreciated that job because I think I got to make a difference in some aspects. What they do now through DOJ, you see the monitoring of the hate groups, and that started back then, although it wasn't ever referred to openly. But that's what I worked on. There were Klan, there were informative years, neo-Nazi groups. It was a very interesting experience. And after that, I worked for a while supervising investigators. I was pretty young. I was 24, and they had me
Wow.
assigned to 24 and no, yeah, 24, and I was 24, and there were also 24 investigators I was supervising at that age, which was really difficult because I was kind of a kid myself in some ways, and they weren't too happy with that. So I worked there for a couple years, and then I went out on my own. I came back to LA to practice because I had my family out here and my union connections, which I figure would be better for business rather than San Francisco, where I still wasn't really rooted that well, right? So I did miss the traveling, but I guess I sort of said, well, one chapter down, you got to move on with your life. Although sometimes I think that was my happiest times, but I couldn't have had the kids and traveled like that. So I guess everything has a place and a season, right? So yeah, I practiced and mostly criminal law for a long time. I also worked in counseling, psychology. I worked at King Drew Place of Family. I worked with pregnant HIV teenagers, which was a very difficult experience. But it was the kind of place where, even though it was very depressing, I felt very needed there. Every week I ran groups. And in fact, I wrote a story that I think is coming out for Luann in one of my books about taking my son there one day because I didn't have a babysitter, and how he got to kind of mediate a gang intervention. They had a gang summit between the Bloods and the Crips, and somehow my 5-year-old son managed to I guess, interject himself and charm them. So for a while, they were entertaining him, teaching him how to play pool, and they took some pictures of it, and it was hanging on. There was this photo where you see this little kid standing on the table, and on either side, you have the Bloods and the Crips helping him hold the cue, and, they bought him donuts, everything he wanted for that morning. He had a good morning, right? It was a great photo, and I was going to take it, although it wasn't mine. But when I came back to steal it, somebody had taken it ahead of me, so I never got it. So I always remind him that, when he was 5, he went to a gang summit. Not many people can say that, right? So I spent, a lot of time in that area, and I did counseling. I always had a number of jobs because I had 5 kids. So you know how that costs money, right?
Wow.
So yeah, it keeps you busy, and it's very expensive. And later, and a little later than that, I guess, I started mediating for the Fed. So I mediated labor disputes, contract disputes, racial allegations, ADA law, that kind of thing. And I did that for a long time. And now I'm just basically doing workers' comp. That's what I do now. That's where you go to the old fields where you go to die when you're when you're past due anything else, right? So it's you can help people in this field. It's some days a little less stressful than trial work, although I do trials now. But and again, for my age, like I say, this is not a career move. This is just a job to keep the bills paid, right? You know how that goes. And in the meantime, I started writing. I wanted to write down some of my experiences. So, to keep kind of a memoir in my mind of things that happened because I tend to forget things. So, the first book is A Fortunate Accident, and it's a crime drama, legal drama, very true to life. It's actually everything I write pretty much is true. I just changed the names. So you wouldn't know who who, what, when, and where, right? And it's about a crooked notario, and all of his crooked surrounding cast of characters, and how they basically fleece the immigrant population. But it's written not as a documentary or as a nonfiction, it's written as a story. So I just took all the characters from real life and changed their names and wrote a book. And then another book came up because I was dealing with a transsexual person. And I started thinking about it because this person actually was a police officer in one of the big cities. And apparently, well, she no longer is. Actually, she ended up, I think she's still alive on death row. I was not able to get that information. I did interview her early, and then they stopped posting information on her. It's a very interesting story. So I took her story and kind of let it evolve about how she got where she got. She went from the Philippines to Bangkok to New Orleans and then to LA, running from the cops that were literally after her because of some things that happened. And she ended up back where she is now in prison. So I wrote her story. Again, names are changed, right? Because there are a lot of people involved in her life. In fact, you know, when I went to write the story, I somehow or other, we have an illustrious family, right? I have a brother-in-law whose brother was one of the cops on the bridge, you know, when Katrina happened, right? You remember that incident?
Oh,
Yeah, very bad. So I managed to get him to, he was going to talk to me, right? He was going to give me an interview on the lowdown about the New Orleans PD. So I was pretty grateful. This is going to really help my book. So I was driving to the airport and he called me and he was crying and he goes, you know, I thought about it. I can't tell you anything because I'll be dead by tomorrow. And I'm going to say, well, you know, this is secret. I'm not going to be telling people. He said, oh, they'll know. So I can't give you an interview. Well, I was already had my ticket and I do like New Orleans. So I proceeded to go there anyway. But sometimes luck, things fall in place, right? So I managed to connect with a female police officer in internal affairs. And hey, she was a disgruntled employee. So you know how that goes. She gave me all kinds of information that I never would have had from him.
Is this all? Oh, I've got to read that book.
You'll like that book, Kathy. You will like it. So I really ended up doing a lot better than I could have hoped for originally because, again, that female take on it a lot better than I think the man I was going to speak with. So that worked out really well. Then I went to write a third book, and I was trying to think of what I wanted to write. I was sort of tired of crime. I wanted to do something a little different. And then I started to think about all the women that I've known, you know, and while I worked in law and psychology, they all have a story. And some of their stories really, when you think about it, have commonalities, even though they have different life experiences, right? They have different settings that they grew up or worked in or socialized in or loved in. But there's a lot of commonalities. And so I started to think, well, you know, let me write them down. So I started jotting down, and there were so many. And so after a while, I tried to find the ones that made the most impact on me. And I ended up with 10. Actually, the last one I wrote was when COVID was at its height, because I interviewed an ER nurse and I got her story. That was one I didn't have from before. And she wasn't somebody I worked with. So her story was very interesting, although, to be honest, I did represent somebody in the family criminally. So, you know, you get these ties to people, right? And their stories come from there. You start talking to them, the stories come out. So I picked these 10 women, very different lifestyles. Some of them are, if you've read the book, there's an older woman waiting to die. There's a soldier from Afghanistan. There's an ER nurse. There's a woman young woman living in poverty. There's a woman who has a child with her employer that she keeps a secret because, you know, obviously for different reasons, as you can imagine. They have various identity issues. They face violence and exploitation and racism and sexism and ageism, and some of the commonalities that all women in different aspects of their life, you know, come to see at one point or another. So really what I see is that in the end, even though I may not live that life, I have a lot of things in common with some of these people. And I wanted to focus on Latinas particularly because I didn't see anything in literature that addressed that particular group of people. And it was a very difficult beginning because everybody was totally against it. Everybody told me, if you write that, nobody's going to read it. Nobody cares. Direct quotes, right? Nobody cares about Mexicans. They don't want to see it. They don't want to hear it. It won't sell. You're going to have all kinds of problems. Why are you doing that? You're wasting your time. And in fact, a few agents, I started looking at agents, and they were interested, but the first thing they told me is, can you change the identity of the women? Can you make them something else? And I said,
Oh,
no, because that's the story. What do you mean? I can't change them. I don't know what somebody else would do in the situation. I only know what they did. So that was a little difficult. But finally, I had written some short stories that were published in journals, various journals, and Kim from Madville approached me about, putting it together as a book.
love
So the
Kim.
first thing, yeah, good for Kim. The first thing that happened though was she sent it out to one of her editors, and he was an older white gentleman, and he had a fit. He had a fit, and he was really upset with it. He was telling me, "Oh no, you can't write about this." He said the same thing, and I said, "Well, I'm not changing it." And he said, "Well, I've helped a lot of people if they do what I say, that kind of thing. You can follow
Oh,
direction." I'm not good at following direction. I guess I'm not a
I'm
joiner.
not either, Francine.
And I had a story, I had a number of stories to tell. So I said, no, I'll probably move on to something else because I can't really change these. And he goes, well, they're too tragic. And I guess it's the way you look at them. They are real life. Maybe they seem tragic to you, but I really saw there was no empathy or identification. And I'm thinking, well, maybe everybody was right. They're telling me don't do this. But then Kim emailed me back and she said, I want to go ahead and publish it anyway. A few changes here and there. And I did that. And so that's how the book came to be. It is pretty interesting because a lot of my family, to be honest, is still very affected by it. They don't like it. But on the other hand, I've published more than several short stories that dealt with my family and growing up. And they were kind of offended by that. I guess you can offend family members when you
Oh, yeah,
start, you know,
absolutely.
right?
I know
So
that firsthand. Yeah. So,
yeah, it's tough.
well, look how much things have changed in just probably when you first started writing it and now. Now, every publisher is looking for diversity. They're looking for
Right.
stories told from the different cultures. And the one thing goes, well, it's great that you're picking now international books and books about other people. And I go, I've been doing this since the very beginning, you all, because I've always been fascinated with people that were raised in different parts of the country or had different religions and cultures. And I want to mention to you, because he's out, do you know Daniel A. Olivis? Do you know him?
Olivas? No,
Yeah.
I don't. How to Date a Flying Mexican. I like
This
the
is going
title.
to be one of our books coming up,
Great.
and I have been picking his books for a long time. And he is interesting. He's an attorney in Los Angeles, and it's new and collected
Oops.
stories of growing. And I just, I'm going to get you guys together because I think you would have a lot of good conversations to talk about. And then I also want you to
Oh,
meet
I
P.K. Thorne.
lost you.
Who did you live in
Let's see.
Birmingham?
Here we go.
Did you live in Birmingham at any time in the South, Francine? She's frozen. Okay, we'll wait just a second and
Uh-oh.
see if she comes back.
Sounds good.
Yeah, are you there,
Um,
Francine?
yeah, it says the internet connection is a little unstable. We've been having power outages here, but right now it's okay. You know what brings to mind when you say that? Let's see, I guess it was last year, 2021, I won the International Latino Book Award for this book. And I was really, really surprised because I, there was, I think, 3,000 entries. And I was thinking, wow, there are a lot of authors. It's just
Are.
in the Latino community. They just don't get the recognition, or they don't get published, or they're I don't know, or they have to self-publish. I guess a lot of them do. Um, and I was just thinking, wow, that's kind of unfortunate. So this year, they had me work as a judge. I read books to be, nominated for best book, and I was really happy that two of them that I had picked won first place, and then I got to give the awards. That was even better.
Oh,
But I was just
Francine,
thinking, it's a very difficult. Yeah, it was a really good
tell them
feeling.
to send their
It
books
was
to
just a
me.
very difficult.
I would love to
You
read them.
know what? I think that's important. It's something I just really have never, worked with. Like, how do you get these things out here, and who do you contact? But there's a lot of talent out there, and I know
Absolutely.
they haven't had a good run. They haven't had it easy. I know that they're trying harder for the diversity, or some are. But you know what? It's still a very hard market to get into,
Well, let's
because I
change that.
think the
We're going to
subject
change it.
matter is difficult.
We're going to work on change.
Yeah, I think it will. Maybe not in my lifetime, but I'm thinking it will slowly evolve. It's just right now, a lot of the authors I talked to, even the ones they got their awards, they were just saying it was just hopeless. They kept reaching out and reaching out, and when they heard, an agent or a publisher heard with the subject matter, they were not interested. And the thing is, for women particularly, they push romance books, Hallmark, and most of us don't write Hallmark because we don't know Hallmark. I mean, that wasn't our life. And
Not
so
my
it's
life.
very hard. Yeah.
It's a
Yeah. And
formula.
it
It's
reflects,
a formula.
it reflects with the people.
Formulaic.
It's a hard pull. So I'm hopeful that, that will slowly change and evolve. There's so much going on in society right now, in polarization, that I think that even magnifies the difference, even more.
Well, I hope tomorrow you'll post the titles of your two books because I definitely want to read
Okay.
them. And then also, for those people that you picked, let those authors know I would love to read their books. I'm still picking books for 2023. So if they would just
I'll go
get
back
there.
to my charts and see if I can find them. A coming of age story coming from somebody in the community is going to be a lot different than the coming of age story from somebody who grew up in Boston, Massachusetts, or Potrero Hill, or, it's a whole other take. So I think that there's more interest in that now, even than 5 or 6 years ago. I'm hopeful that that's the case.
You know, I read a lot of books. I mean, I got 1,500 last year. I haven't gotten as many this year, but I think I've gotten better quality.
Uh-huh.
But the more you read, the more you see the same stories over and over. I am bored to death with those stories about, oh, I'm, going to get married and then I want to have a child. And, all those things are wonderful. But in today's world, it's not applicable to
Right,
even my own children. I mean,
right,
kids are waiting later to get married and they're disillusioned about, and then they have the whole COVID thing where they can't even date or go.
right.
So I would really like to read those stories. The other thing I want to ask you, you said you lived in the South. Where did you live in the South?
Well, I didn't live, when I investigated, I was in the South. So they sent me on cases there. A lot of Mississippi, Alabama, some
Did you go to
Georgia,
Birmingham?
Tennessee. I'm sorry?
Did you go to Birmingham by
I
any
did
chance?
go to Birmingham.
Oh my gosh.
Birmingham was kind of interesting because my my aunt, it's been many years ago, obviously she was Mexican, and she married an African American man, and they had a kind of interesting story in Birmingham, Alabama back in the day,
Yeah.
right? So they burned crosses on their lawn, and I remember my mother telling me that. I was little, and I really couldn't understand the phenomena of it. And I think that they wouldn't, if I understand correctly, they weren't even allowed to be buried in the same cemetery because they segregate the burials also, and they did at that time.
There's a
So
story.
it's
There's a
very
story.
interesting. So I wanted, of course, to see Birmingham. I took that assignment right away. There was a lot of beautiful country there, but there was a lot of sadness too. I mean, I think things are slowly moving, but back in the 70s, I didn't see a whole lot of progress, you know,
I want you to meet author
from
T.K.
what
Thorne because
was going on in the city.
she was a police officer in Birmingham, and she was a captain. And over all the I think you guys would have so many things to talk about. She'll be at Girlfriend Weekend, but I'm going to
Talk about, yeah, we probably would.
I think you would have a lot of things in common. And she writes the most interesting stories, and she's funny as all get out.
I
And
believe that.
and I see all these wonderful connections. But now what I want to really do is I want to open it up to all this. So I'm going to put you back on gallery view. And I want, if anybody has some comments on anything that Francine has been talking about or questions, now's the time to pipe up. Hey, Jim, how are you doing down there in the corner? I just saw you pop in, so good to see you. Anybody have any questions about her book, A Woman's Story? Yes, Suzanne.
So Francine, you mentioned that you just changed the names in your novels. So I'm just curious, like, if you took some liberties or if you made changes for dramatic purposes in the short stories.
Very little, if I
Really?
could help it, very little. The stories are pretty dramatic on their own. So
Right.
I did obviously change names. I changed like street names also. I mean, I'm very familiar with the neighborhood, so I just switched streets around. So, if you were trying to ID this particular person, it wouldn't be all that easy. But if you're from the neighborhood and you read the stories, you will know where they take place. You'll know
Mhm.
these locations. And maybe you even ran into these people at one point, but you wouldn't be able to pin it on that particular person.
Yeah, I mean, I found them believable, but there's so much drama and violence, and so
Yeah.
yeah.
It's funny in real life. If you tell the real story, nobody ever believes you. But if you fictionalize it, you know,
Yes,
it's funny that way.
it
So
is. That's absolutely the case.
it's
Yeah. I would, people talk about their clients, right? You might not mention name, but we have it, and they're like, really? No. But when they read it in a book, their their whole focus changes, and it's sometimes a lot more empathetic than it would be if you told them that that's what a client's going through. It's very interesting how people react. I think a lot of people don't want to see some of this. It's very hard to see, but it is also very real. And you experience the life you live, and it's influenced by your locale and everything in your past and future. The one that, for some reason, I don't know why, the story, if you've read it, is Smiley and Laughing Girl, and it's about a formerly incarcerated gang member and how she gets out of prison and her backstory and how she got there and how she comes and gets her daughter, who's 14, out of well, the foster care system, the state. And all of a sudden, she sees her daughter is her. Her daughter has become her. And she didn't want that life, right, for her daughter. But how does she fix it? What do you do to change that? And she has her own solution. And her own solution probably shocks a lot of people. She has to get her daughter away from the gang member that she's taken up with. And what she says in her story is very real. She says, there's no justice for people like us unless we make it ourselves. Now, oddly enough, I found that in the South a lot. I found that as an expression that people, were sharing with me, maybe not in those general words, but in thought and attitude. And I thought that was very interesting. It was kind of across the board at certain levels that this is how we have to handle our life ourselves because there are no support nets or things that can correct problems. So, but that story, for whatever reason, when I sent it out, I got like, I don't know, 20 journals responding right away. And I thought that's funny because this story is so foreign to what they normally print in their journals, that are, for lack of a better word, they're very white middle class type stories. But and I don't know, maybe it's that morbid fascination or that story just picked up wind. And after that, I thought, well, maybe I can put together some more. That seemed to be an audience for that. And that's the one people always wanted me to read, the excerpt from when I promoted the book. Um, and it's pretty gritty, but it is real. It is real to the people that lived it. And the woman So I could tell you the ending. I won't, but the woman ended up back in prison because, whoops, let me get rid of this, because she did take care of it herself. There's no justice.
Oh, here comes
I'm just,
Wonder Chang. Yeah,
where?
she wanted to make it tonight. She's looks like
Oh, I don't, oh, there she is on the bottom. Hi, Wandra.
Hi,
How are you? I'm
I'm
glad
good.
glad you're here.
Yeah. Well, the dinner is still going on.
Yeah.
there's a
We're still
family
here.
night thing going on, but we're happy you're here. And Francine's been telling us all about her stories in her book, and it's a fascinating story. And also, she brought up the fact that, women are not always the stories that were given to read aren't always stories about what is really happening. Right before I came on here, you all remember Bess Meyerson?
Yes,
She she won the Miss America pageant.
right,
She was
right,
the first Jewish woman
right.
to win, and it was talking about it, and I didn't realize any of this, but she was basically asked not to do certain things, so she got out of that system. But that wasn't that long ago.
No,
Well,
it wasn't.
and I think we've only had one Jewish Miss America. Isn't that crazy to
That's
think that?
interesting. I never thought about that.
I never either. And when I was a kid, I loved the Miss America pageant, but I don't know why. I just thought it was fascinating that I don't know. It was the times. I grew up in the
Right,
50s,
right.
60s, and 70s, and then by the time I got to the 70s, of course, that was not seen as quite
Fitting.
unless you've ever been forced to be in a pageant like I was in high school. You don't realize how demeaning those pageants can be. And if you read my book, which I tell everybody, read my book because it's the story about why books saved me and why I'm on a mission to help authors like Francine and Kathy and Suzanne and Jim and Wanda and Tracy. Why I'm trying to get your stories out there, because if we don't have a conversation with the authors who write the stories, we never get the fully focused picture. So that's why it's important to me that all of you come aboard on Tuesday nights so we can hear what it really is like for you as an author. And it's a struggle for everybody, but I imagine that if you come from a Latina background, it is really tough. And I kind of understand a teeny bit because my cousin's daughter married a man from Mexico, and she has four of the most beautiful children. And three of them are, half Mexican and half American, and I love them to death. And when all these things were going up about, these children taken from their parents when they were trying to cross the border, I had a real problem with that because I don't think children should ever be separated from their parents. And I spoke pretty vocally about it because now there's 700 and some kids that they don't know where they are, or their parents don't know where they are.
Right.
And that's wrong. And I just don't understand as a mother how anybody in the world could think it's okay to take your children away.
You know what happens though, I think, and I see this more and more, and that's sort of a focal point of my writing. It's them and us. And it's not happening to us. It's happening to them over there. And there's no integration. That's of the merger of the peoples. It's separate. It happens in this country, it happens there, but it's not our kids. And I've heard that argued so many times. It's those brown babies, it's not our babies. And that seems to be a very strong argument. And, how do you convince somebody that it shouldn't be separated? They're babies, they're children. But there's that you and us, or them and us. And that, I think, allows for so much disparity in our society today.
I think a lot differently about weird things. And this is my one thing that I think really different about is when I was in high school, in junior high, it was the big thing to tan to get as brown as you could be.
Right.
I mean, we laid out for hours. I was a lifeguard. When all my freckles held hands, I had a tan. And I think, how could we say somebody's too, like Shah Rukh Khan said, they said when I went into the movies, I was too chocolatey. And I go, I spent my whole entire tween, teenage, college years trying to be as chocolatey as I could be. And I go, why would we differentiate against somebody who is browner than we are, or darker than we are, or of a different, I don't get it. And has anybody ever thought about this before, or is it just me? I just
conversation with a friend of mine on Friday night.
Yes.
Really do. And her name's Tiffany, and she's a good friend of mine, and she's African American, and we were talking about it, and from her perspective, and she's very educated, and she has somebody that's underneath her at work who will not take orders from her because she's Black. And, as if her whole entire intelligence is based on her skin color.
Right.
It's
and
so
it's sad. And it was sad to hear that from her, because she's very smart. She's funny, and she's a lot of fun. And, for somebody to treat her like that, it just really made me sad.
we haven't come so far, have we, to have somebody?
Yeah, I was going to say that. And you know what else? And I bring this up. I think I can say this. Unfortunately, in cultures where we are looking at people who are darker, like my culture, there's a hierarchy, because the darker you are in your own culture, the more discrimination you're going to face. And that's something
Rita
people-
Golden. She wrote, don't go play out in the sun.
Oh yeah. And my mother would tell me, you're dark enough already, get out of the sun, get out, because she faced discrimination, right? So she didn't want me to face the same, or, you can't buy a red skirt. I remember that distinctively.
Why?
Because that's what they expect us to wear. Yeah, and that stuck with me, or still sticks with me, because I'm a lot older now, but for forever, I guess, I would look at clothing, and if it was too bright, oh no, I just wouldn't pick it, because that's been ingrained. That's a lot of years of ingrained, right? So yeah, it has influenced. I can see it in my own family.
You didn't see it as clothing. You were looking at it as if it was a costume.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's a good book I'm reading.
Okay.
It's called The Last White Man by
Okay.
Mohsin Hamid. He's
Okay.
the person who wrote The Reluctant Fundamentalist.
Oh yeah, that's right.
Yeah, might have won.
Pick it up. The Last White
Yeah,
Man.
The Last White Man. That's his most recent. And then also he wrote Exit West. But anyway, this one has some magical realism element in it, and it goes like this. This white town, all the white people, just like what's his name, that this person wakes up and he finds himself turned into a bug. What's his name? Kafka.
Oh,
Yeah,
Kafka.
Kafka. Metamorphosis.
Oh,
It's to that.
right. Okay. I was trying to figure out.
This white man has a white girlfriend that he has known since childhood. Anyway, he wakes up and he finds himself Black. And it turns out, so he has a hard time. He doesn't go to work for a few days, and he teaches at the gym and stuff. And the boss says, if you don't come, you don't get paid. And, after a while, don't bother to come, that kind of stuff. So he finally decides to tell his father. His father accepts him. I mean, that's his son.
Right.
So anyway, the girlfriend accepts him, they still carry on their affairs. And so more and more people in the village, in the city, are turning Black. They all of a sudden they turn Black. So they are exactly the same people, but just because the skin color changed, the villagers, and his father gives him a gun for self-protection. So that shows you. So the town people are now trying to gather up these Black people and put them somewhere.
Oh my
Get
God.
them out of the town. I mean,
Is this a new book? Is this a new
it's a
book?
new book. It's a new book. It's a very interesting book. You know, it's a satire, sort of. Feels like a
Of
satire.
course it is. I've got to write this down.
The last white
Last
man.
white man.
Yeah.
Okay.
And, you know, nothing changed about the person except the skin color. And more people in the village are turning Black. So they are, you know, they are accepting a little more as it goes. I didn't finish the book.
Well,
But
I'm
it's,
gonna read that one too.
it's an interesting book. And, you know, he's a very good writer.
Well,
So
we've
yeah,
got
to
we've
read
got
that.
to have these discussions, like the stories in Francine's book, like the story in this, and because you know, we're doing these book and film clubs, and I did an Indian film that we got nearly 5,000 people watching it from India. It was on RRR, and people said, "Do not." You know, I had some people making remarks like, you know, we're anti-American and we don't really want you putting your Western beliefs. And I go, first of all, that's not what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to build a bridge. I'm trying to show people that we all tend to be, you know, whether how we're raised, we learn these prejudices. We learn that if people look different, then they're not as good or what. People teach those things.
Right.
And I always think about my grandfather, who was a white cowboy from Kansas. And, you know, I adored him. But he always had something. I always liked to watch Tarzan movies on Sunday. And he would get so mad at me because he goes, and he used derogatory sayings. You don't want to watch those people and the natives and all this. And then years and years later, when I'm grown, he's in the hospital, a Catholic hospital in Wichita, and he's had some heart problems. And my mother's sister goes, "Oh my Lord, they put him in the room with a 25-year-old Black man." And we're like, "Oh my God." And I'll never forget this as long as I live in my life. I walked into the room and my, you know, elderly grandfather goes, "What's happening, man?" And I looked at him and we all looked at him. He goes, "You got to meet my buddy over here." You know, I can't remember the kid's name. And he said, "We have just really hit it off." And I said, "You know, this is a situation where they were both thrown into the hospital with life-threatening illnesses, and they had a conversation. I don't know what happened, but everything changed like that." And I found out later that 25-year-old man that was in the hospital was the first man in our part of the world that had AIDS.
Oh,
And he was probably more than likely, I don't know, you know, I'm guessing, but he may have been gay too. And so here's my grandfather. It was absolutely, you know, one of the most shocking things I've ever seen. We were all just, our mouths were just hanging open, and they were just the buddies the whole time they were there and everything. And I never heard him ever say a word after that, ever again. So that's why we have the conversation, because if people really get to know each other, you find out you don't have that many differences. You have more likes than, you know, yeah, we may be eating different foods, but Mexican food is my #1 favorite food. And I like the real stuff. And, you know, I love food from other countries, from India and Thailand, all this stuff. But if you don't expose yourself to reading the stories and experiencing the cultures and the people and traveling to those countries, then how are we ever going to get on a level playing field?
yeah.
So that's what this book club is all about. It's about building bridges, telling stories that haven't been heard before or that need to be heard. I mean, it's amazing just the few things I've learned tonight from Francine and now Wandra. And we all have these stories. So I'm hoping that we'll continue even more so at our annual Girlfriend Weekend. And I've got a really diverse pick this year. I think every year I say it's my best books I've ever picked, but I do think that, but you need to go, if you read my book, you can actually, each chapter at the end of it, it says, if you like the story, read these books. And at the end of the book, from the time I started the book club until it was published, they posted my reading lists. So this was endorsed by the Texas Library Association because it's promoting everything, diversity, reading. But here's all my books through the years. It's listed, and you can go through there and you can see I read the Cabell Beauty School, you know. And I'm trying to think of all these books that we've chose from different, the Canal House, from different countries and different perspectives. So Francine, best case scenario, what is your life goal for your writing? What would you like to see the best thing that could happen from telling these stories?
You know, I guess to me, the best outcome would be that individuals who read it get a chance to look at the world through somebody else's eyes. I think that's the most important thing. And I think that's what kept me writing and you know, finishing these stories, because there was so much discouragement, so many people telling me, no, don't do this, you know, it won't work. But I really think that's important. And, you know, however many people read it, I realize it may be a limited market, but people do pass on what they read and learn. And I think that it does influence how you act and how you behave toward other people. If you have that little bit of experience that you're faced with, or you get immersed for a short while, even in another outlook. So that to me is important. And as I indicated, I think I posted, the book I'm working on very slowly right now is totally different. It's about a young white female who becomes indoctrinated into the, say, white power neo-Nazi culture. So I'm coming at it from a totally different way now, and I am researching it and talking to people. And unfortunately, so I share this. Here goes the dirty linen, right? I was inspired to write this because one of my kids, one of my daughters, in fact, married into a family, QAnon, and she became QAnon, right? And
What is
we have
QAnon? I don't know what that is.
okay,
Explain.
so it's a where do I start? It's a conspiracy theorist, I guess I should say, organization. They very what can I say? Very right wing. They started out kind of Trump supporters, but it got worse. They sponsored these January 6th riots on the Capitol. They're very much into hate and promoting a lot of negative things. I mean, they were promoting that, what was it, Hillary Clinton, Joe Biden rape babies, and you know, stuff like that. You've seen some of that stuff, I'm sure. Heard it.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah,
I want
so
to read that book
unfortunately,
because that's
yeah.
terrible. It's terrible. And when I was lived in California, I had a little bit of that happen. I actually, you know, no names involved, but I became kind of an au pair for two doctors that had, he had twin daughters from a first marriage, and she had a son from a previous marriage who was the neo-Nazi. And the family went on vacation with the two younger daughters, but she said, my son, will you house sit while we're gone? So, and I said, sure. And she goes, will you, my son may be coming down with some of his friends for the weekend because, you know, we're not there. And they did. And I'm telling you, it was the scariest thing I've ever been through in my life, because these people were young, and it's like they didn't have any feeling. They were just mad.
Right.
They, you know, shaved heads and studs, and, you know, and I dress differently. I don't hold anything against people who dress differently, but they got into a fight, and there were avocado trees all over the back, and they just threw avocados everywhere. And it took me a full day to clean up the mess. And in the kitchen, they just thrown it in the house, in this beautiful home, just smashed avocados everywhere. And then when I got home, I told her that I had to clean it all up. And, it would be really nice, since I'm a college student, if I could get some restitution. She goes, it should be a privilege for you to stay in our home. Why should I pay you for cleaning that up? And I was just thinking, it's still just, and I quit that day. I said, no,
Yeah.
I'm not going. But what I want to say is that, you know, by sharing these stories, we all have ones. They come to light. And then by sharing them, then maybe people can see that's not right. And I wonder what happened to those kids today. I mean, wonder what they're like now. You know, a lot of people change. A lot of people, I was as nice to them as I possibly could be, but I was a little scared. And they were big, you know, they were like 6 foot something. And there were 8 boys and 1 girl. And that was scary. I feared for her. And, but anyway, you know, I want to hear these stories, and it's just like, you know, we just recently went and saw Jamie Ford speak, and he's, you know, comes from this experience of his mother was white and his father was Asian. And he's been writing these books for years. And when he, you know, the time before he came to Dallas, he spoke at a high school, and they literally were telling him to go back home. And he goes, what do you mean go back home? I'm American. Francine, were you born in this country?
Yes, I was in LA.
You're telling American stories, okay?
Right. That's the thing that's interesting. You know what? Just on an ending note, what was really disappointing was what I learned. I learned one thing. The publishing world was ready for immigrant stories. They have no problem with immigrant stories. Okay, look at American Dirt. I have a lot of criticism of that book for a lot of different reasons that I won't go into. Yeah, they will hear immigrant. They want immigrants because immigrants have their place, and they're a certain way, and they can understand that. But the people who are Latinos or Hispanic, whatever word you want to use, that are American because they're born here, does not agree with them. They have trouble understanding the concept or accepting the concept. And that's what makes some of the writing very difficult to, you know, promote in public, because I see the immigrant stories. There's tons of them promoted. But that's the way, unfortunately, the stereotype people have. You know, the guy that comes across on top of the train and he goes through the hardships, but he prevails because he's in America and life is wonderful once he crosses the border. Those stories have a formula. They are Hallmark in their own, right? But stories
but then he goes into the woods, right? He goes
I'm
into
sorry?
the woods. He goes into the woods, and he either becomes American or he doesn't become American, and that's the story.
Yeah,
It's not
story.
over. I mean, it is. That's the story too. But to me,
the story is that we are all born here, Americans, that we all came from somewhere else, people.
Exactly.
And if we didn't come from somewhere else, we're Native Americans, you know, we're Lakota or Cherokee or whatever. But the thing about it is, the boxes that they try to put us in is very, you know, when my book came out, they put it in self-help because it said Tierra Waring Book Sharing Guide to Life. And it's a memoir. It's my story of how books saved me. I was next to Dr. Phil on the self-help. I go, that's not what my book is. My book is a memoir. It's not a self-help. I go, everything I learned through my mistakes, only now I call them discoveries because it sounds better to say I discovered that didn't work. But you're an American, Francine. You're telling an American story.
Right.
Why do we have to make books African American, you know, the gay community books? What?
Right.
We just say that's an American author that wrote a love story about 2 people. Why do we have to put them in those boxes? So
yeah, that's the ideal.
well, I'm a cat that doesn't like to be put in a box, and I don't feel like if you read a book that tells a great story, that's just what it is. It's a great story. It doesn't, you can label it anything you want, but nobody wants to be labeled. I mean, nobody really wants to be labeled. I have been prejudiced against my entire life because you know, people go, well, you're a Southern hairdresser. What could you possibly know about reading? Well, I've been to 7 universities. I've graduated from college. It just happened to be the way I put myself through school. it was an ends to a means. But I also recognize now at 66 years old, there is nothing wrong in being in service to others. Where
Right.
here in America, you are not considered as important if you're, if you're a postal worker or you're a hairdresser or a barber or a garbage collector. But you think about, you take those people away, and it's kind of what's happened during COVID. We've lost
Right.
all the help because people are not going back to those jobs. And so now what do? And if you ever go to any construction site, especially here in East Texas, the hardest workers are going to be the Hispanic workers. And I watched, as I was pulling in my gate one summer, I watched eight white men standing around one Mexican worker digging a ditch. And I stopped and I rolled down the window and I go, why aren't you helping him? And they looked at me and they all just started getting on their phones and going to their cars and everything. There were 8 men watching this man dig the trench, just watching that poor guy. And I think, shame on you. It just infuriates me when I hear these stories. So I hope everybody will read your book, A Woman's Story. I hope everybody will watch your blogs this week. Please, tomorrow, post your other books. I want to read them. How
Sure.
far along are you on this 3rd book?
Well, I am only like, I don't know, page 215. There's a lot that has to happen yet. I'm trying to fit it in, between work, which the bad thing for me is after I've been, at hearings and computer all day, we Zoom everything now, right? There's hardly any live trials anymore. The last thing I want to do is sit in front of the computer and write. So I really have to crack the whip on myself because I just don't feel the desire. I want to get up and do something, instead of being sedentary. But the story is, as I said, it is somewhat evolutionary because it is a family story. It's real. And I think somehow maybe it's a memoir for me because it does put a cap on a relationship.
Well, we're having difficulty. We'll wait till she unfreezes, but interesting story. Anybody have any comments they want to make while we're waiting for her to get back online? Well, I hope you all will go to the blog tomorrow. She's got some really great things that she's been featuring, and she'll be up here all week. Francine, I'm sorry. I bet you can hear us, but you're just frozen. This is so unfortunate. I hate that. I've had it happen to me. Are you guys still there? Are you all still there? Everybody's froze. Can you guys hear me now? Here we are. Are we all back? Oh, how unfortunate. Okay. Can anybody hear me? I'm the only one back on. Okay, everybody, I'm so sorry. We're having some internet problems. I hope this all got recorded. I will go ahead and end the meeting tonight. Please come to the Pulpwood Queen presents her.
So there she is.
There
I'm
she is.
back. It keeps going in and out. You guys, I think we're going to have to end it. So
Okay.
I hope it got recorded. I will put it all up and just go to her blog tomorrow. And thank you for joining us. Sorry about the internet connectivity, but these things happen. So bye for now. It's all about the story. And please read Francine Rodriguez's A Woman's Story, our bonus book of the month. And we'll see you next time. Thank you, Francine. So sorry.